Folks, right now we're going to talk to you about espionage. Spies, both international and underwater. What am I talking about? I often ask myself, and when I really don't know, I turn to Sun News reporter Chris Sims, who joins us as she so often does from Ottawa. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Theo.
All right, we got a couple of spy stories to talk about. Go ahead.
It sounded like you were describing a really awesome Bond car there for a second.
No.
Spies underwater. All right, seriously though, there's a story out that was first reported, to give credit, by the CBC earlier this week, saying that CSIS is still sharing information on potential terrorists with their American counterparts. Between 2009 and 2010, apparently Canadian spy officials shared the names of 27 Canadian citizens with their American counterparts, also sharing the names of 14 foreign nationals who are currently living in Canada, listing them as potential or terrorist threats. What's interesting is that all of these so-called Toronto 18 were included on that list. That includes 7 whose charges were dropped, 7 who pleaded guilty, and 4 who had otherwise convictions. So it's interesting to see. The point here is that Canadian officials are still sharing terrorist and spy information with American officials. Not so sure how out there that is.
Okay, and as you say, CSIS being, the spy agency or the intelligence agency, I guess. We don't say spy because, of course, espionage is illegal in every country in the world.
Spy's more fun, though, okay?
It is. It's way more fun. And you know what? We should name Spy versus Spy is something that we could consider for our segments together. But, okay, so the idea that, so it was WikiLeaks. So do we trust this source? Is this reliable, this report, do you suppose?
They look like pretty serious diplomatic cables and also secret cables between these two organizations. So it looks legit. And what's also interesting is that it had also, WikiLeaks last month, you might remember, also released the name of this guy who has a Montreal connection. Right now, he's sitting in Guantanamo Bay as an enemy combatant, but he apparently has ties as a kingpin to the Montreal terrorist cell and also to Ahmed Rassam. You might remember he's known as the Millennium Bomber. He was picked up on a BC ferry crossing the border into Washington State, allegedly to blow up the Los Angeles airport. So very interesting stuff coming out of WikiLeaks lately.
Yeah, and of course that guy, by definition, he was before 9/11. That guy, that Millennium Bomber guy.
Rassam, correct?
And well, look. Let me guess. There's been basically no official comment from CSIS about whether they're sharing the names of Canadian citizens with their U.S. counterparts. Is that right?
That's correct. No official comment. I'm not even sure CSIS exists.
Well, of course they don't exist. I'm not sure we exist, Chris.
Right.
All right, listen. I promised the people a couple different kinds of spies. You got some underwater spies to talk to us about. Go ahead.
Apparently, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has an intelligence branch. They actually have people who work within the fisheries industry. They go undercover and they investigate potential illegal or otherwise poaching fisheries. Now, in all seriousness, the Cohen Commission was struck in November of 2009 after a disastrous run of sockeye salmon on the lower Fraser River. Apparently, there were so few of these big sockeye salmon fish that they couldn't have either a native commercial fishery or a regular commercial fishery. The only fishery that had occurred that year was the so-called food and ceremonial fishery by Native Indians in that region of Canada. And what John Cummins, the current leader designate of the BC Conservative Party, has been saying for years and alleging for years is that some of these Native and Indian fishermen are using their food and ceremonial fish for commercial purposes and selling it. And yesterday there was compelling testimony from these DFO officers who are swearing under oath, albeit with this evidence, saying that they raided a lot of these fish plants back in 2005 and found over 350,000 cold storage salmon. They're hanging in cold storage, they're frozen. Some of them were already processed, meaning they were filleted, heads cut off, they were in vacuum sealed packaging. And what the DFO officer was trying to say under oath yesterday was that it's obvious that some of this stuff was bound for a commercial market, whether it's a fish market or a restaurant or who knows, overseas, internationally. And so very interesting stuff. However, they ran out of money. They were able to track these fish to cold storage units, but weren't able to track the fish all the way to, say, the alleged restaurant door. And that's what Ernie Craig has a problem with. Ernie Craig is a spokesperson for the Stolo Nation, which is basically all the Indian bands along the Fraser River, including the Chiam Band out of Chilliwack and Hope. And what he's saying is, yeah, we fish ceremonially and for our own communities, and guess what? we are advanced. We store our fish in modern refrigeration units. We even vacuum seal them, and it isn't abnormal to pick up 200 fish at a time for ceremonial or familial purposes. So he's basically saying, you've given us all a black eye as Native Indians and as fishermen, but you don't have the smoking gun. You don't have the final evidence. Very interesting stuff out of BC.
Okay, I'll bite. How would filleting and vacuum sealing fish be considered a ceremonial activity?
Well, I just got off the phone with Mr. Cray, and he says that, of course, we only have one fishery per year, and this fish is supposed to feed us for the whole year. So in order to store it, as he put it, we're not smoking it on our back porch anymore. We actually have to use proper methods for storage, and so we're going to flash freeze it, cold store it, and vacuum seal it, and we'll have it for the whole year. He said maybe there's a wedding. Maybe there's, 500 people coming to your wedding. So it's not strange to drive into Vancouver in your pickup truck and pick up 200 fish. He's also saying maybe that they're hiring a commercial fisherman from a Native Indian band to fish for an entire village or several villages. So it's not strange to have all these fish. What he also said is they don't actually, along Vancouver Island and the coast, they apparently don't have huge, they call them reefers. They're big like refrigeration units that these fishermen use. They don't have these units along that coast. They're only really located in certain areas of Vancouver. So he's saying, well, can you blame us? We're catching all these fish legally for our own purposes and storing them for the year. No big deal.
Okay, but the spies,
right,
the fish spies that we spoke of at the top, their contention is, well, you've always been able to do this ceremonially and as a matter of tradition, and that's fine, but for some reason this particular time, you've overdone it. So, and the explanation, Chris, that, there could be a wedding or there could be a big event or there could be, I don't know, bar mitzvah, whatever the thing is.
I think it's called a naming ceremony, actually.
Okay, that sounds like it's theoretically possible, but it doesn't explain why there's a discrepancy. And the reason the spies went in the first place, the underwater spies, the reason they went in is because, well, the fish population has been completely, annihilated compared to what we saw in previous years. That's the question that's still unanswered, right? Precisely.
And also because I'm from that area, and it was kind of this open secret that one could get food fish. It was understood one could buy food fish. And Ernie Cray, the Chiam band member, doesn't dispute that. He says there's lots of Stolo kids who will catch fish on their own and sell it, to their neighbor for $4, or out of the back of a station wagon or something. He said that's not what this investigation's about. What the DFO is alleging is that Native fishermen, using their ceremonial or food fish rights, are fishing on a massive commercial scale and then selling it in massive commercial quantities. That's what the DFO alleges, and they were able to prove it all the way to the cold storage point in an actual operation called Project Ice Storm. They named it. They were actually able to track these fish right to this cold storage unit, but then they ran out of money. The DFO ran out of money for this investigation and weren't able to trace it to the actual sale point.
Well, let's pick up the trail. Chris Sims, we'd like you to go deeper into this. We're going to ship some goggles, flippers, and a snorkel out to you. We'd like you to be our underwater spy and get to the bottom of this if they've come to a cold trail. Chris Sims, Sun News reporter, joining us from Ottawa. Thank you so much.
There's something fishy going on here.
Oh, my God. Someone had to say it between the two of us. All right. See you later. Thanks, Paul. All right.